My fiancée, Willow, was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and not only did I neglect her, but I also went abroad to unwind. After the 100th missed call, my 36D busted personal secretary picked up the phone. On the other end, I could hear Willow's voice, nearly on the verge of breaking down. She asked, "Where are you? Who is with you?" I couldn't help but sneer and say, "Didn't we agree to give each other freedom? We agreed to live our own lives. Can't you handle it?" Chapter 1. Willow and I were stuck with the childhood sweethearts turned strangers script. We had mutual feelings as teenagers, but before we could even confess to each other, she met her fated person, Makoto. Under pressure from her parents, Makoto broke up with her right before graduation and flew abroad alone. Heartbroken, Willow managed to finish college with my help, but just as she was preparing to move on, the man who had once abandoned her suddenly returned to start a business back home. For reasons unknown to me, Willow not only used all of her savings to support Makoto but also became his personal secretary, staying by his side, working late into the night with him. Just before our families were about to announce our engagement, it seemed like I was about to play the role of the villainous male supporting character, scheming against the main lead, suppressing him, and eventually reaping what I sowed. However, that's not what I planned to do. On the contrary, I understood them very well. After all, it wasn't until I found myself a 3060 personal secretary that I realized something important. Life is short, enjoy it while you can. People need someone considerate by their side, especially someone like me, a domineering CEO. Chapter 2. I inherited the family business earlier than Willow did. After all, she spent 3 years in high school and 2 years in college being caught up in relationships, while I never stopped my studies. By the time I was in my first year of high school, I had already mastered all the knowledge required for the college entrance exam. In the following 2 years, Willow was busy dating and chasing after Makoto, while I, under my father's guidance, began to study international finance. During the summer vacation, Willow was off racing cars by the river with Makoto. Meanwhile, my father and I flew abroad, attending various financial seminars. After the college entrance exams, I effortlessly got into the school and major I wanted. I began formally accepting my family's arrangement to learn about the company's operations and management. Willow, on the other hand, was so heartbroken from her breakup that she failed her entrance exam. The Liu family spent a lot of money to get her into a private college with a decent reputation among the wealthy. Coincidentally, the school was in the same city as mine, even in the same district. Mrs. Liu entrusted me with taking care of her. I smiled and agreed. Looking at Willow with deep and gentle affection, I said, "Willow is just temporarily shaken by a setback. She feels a lack of self-worth, but she's such an exceptional girl. She deserves all the best things in the world. So, no matter how many challenges lie ahead, I'll be by her side to help her become a better version of herself." Mrs. Liu looked at me, visibly moved, with a hint of deeper consideration. Mrs. Liu was the embodiment of a modern, independent woman. She liked hearing the right words, so I had thoroughly strategized on what to say. If Willow kept focusing on love and not on herself, the best way to protect her from being taken advantage of by men was to always have someone by her side who could bring her great benefits. Someone who was deeply infatuated with her. After that, the Liu family handed over 3 projects to us. My father was very pleased with this. Just before I was about to go to the capital for university, he called me into his study. He asked, "What do you think of that girl from the Liu family?" I answered, "She's average," I said. "Aside from being good-looking, you could say she's good for nothing." My father burst out laughing and nodded approvingly. He said, "George, remember this, emotions are worthless in the face of interests. Never act as a blood bag for someone else. You can like someone, but this liking should never be greater than your ideals and ambitions. For women who don't appreciate you, who only know how to take, don't try to change them or nurture them. You treat them like giant babies. Indulge them, enjoy the moment, and play along. After all, who says you can only have one woman?" I lowered my gaze, thought for a moment, then looked up at my father and smiled knowingly. Chapter 3. In Willow's eyes, I might have been deeply in love with her. In her freshman year, to comfort her after she lost Makoto and spent every day crying, I made it a point to bring her breakfast every morning before she woke up. I'd bring hot soup and tea cakes, just the way she liked them. At first, she resisted a bit and said to me, "George, I only realized after meeting Makoto that I've always seen you as a brother. I will never fall in love with you, so please stop doing these unnecessary things." I simply smiled without replying, handed her the breakfast, and left. As usual, I posted a message visible only to Mrs. Liu, "Morning run completed." The picture would conveniently show a corner of Willow's school gate. Soon, Mrs. Liu would like the post. Our 2 families had been discussing a collaboration recently, and things were progressing remarkably smoothly. I put my phone away, zipped up my tracksuit, and continued running along the leaf-covered path. I wasn't lying. I really was doing my morning exercise. A qualified heir to a company needs to maintain good physical health. So every morning, I ran 4 kilometers and passed by Willow's school to bring her breakfast from a street vendor. It didn't take much effort. Later, I started entering various university entrepreneurship competitions, using these events to hone my skills. For the more prestigious ones, I would give Willow a little push. She was deeply moved just by being added as a team member. Finally, after a night of heavy drinking, she leaned into my arms and gazed at me with affection, saying, "George, I've realized for a long time now that you've always stood in the corner, silently giving without expecting anything in return. So, I want to reciprocate your feelings." I turned my head, remaining silent, as though I hadn't heard her. The next day, after Willow sobered up, she probably regretted being so forward. We both tacitly avoided bringing it up again, but the look in her eyes when she looked at me became one of increasing guilt. Of course, I wasn't the only one she felt guilty towards. She once thought that my quiet devotion was because I was busy, too busy selling favors to classmates who had connections with our family business. Their needs were all different. Some just wanted to copy my homework. Others wanted to use my name to reassure their families while they played around. And some were looking for emotional returns. I was too busy to talk about it openly. So even though I never confessed my feelings to Willow, I somehow gave her the impression that I was so in love with her. I was humble to the point of being invisible. Chapter 4. I did have feelings for Willow, before she fell into decline because of her relationship with Makoto. Among the people I'd helped with favors, Willow was the one I paid the most attention to. I was even more concerned than I had set for myself, crossing some boundaries I had established. It was simply because at that time, Willow wasn't just beautiful. She was outstanding, pretty and smart, effortlessly shining in every situation. At the same time, she was special to me. People around us just assumed we'd become a couple. There were times when I would gaze at her delicate face, daydreaming, thinking that things could have been nice. But after Makoto appeared, things changed. Willow started following him, skipping classes, drinking, getting tattoos, racing cars, and partying at nightclubs, all in pursuit of some so-called freedom. As her grades plummeted, she went viral on social media with some suggestive videos. But in the end, both she and Makoto got their records tainted due to underage drinking and driving without a license. Willow from the Liu family is done for, my father remarked at the time, and I agreed with him. So I quickly decided to stop investing my feelings. I stopped getting emotionally involved. Everything after that went smoothly. With my help, Willow gradually started to smile again. She still had some smarts in her, and with Mrs. Liu's care, who spent a lot of money to support her, she eventually recovered. By the time she graduated from university, she re-entered our circle of second-generation heirs. Afterward, Willow began interning at her family's company, while I returned home to prepare to inherit the family business. As Wang's company continued to grow steadily, Mrs. Liu proposed a marriage alliance. Mrs. Liu took Willow's hand and, looking down on me, said, "Normally, I wouldn't support Willow marrying beneath her, because only the heir of the Mu family is worthy of her. But Willow insists that she will only marry you, and I can't change her mind. So, you must cherish her, love her, put her first in everything, and never disappoint her love for you. Understand?" I smiled and nodded, promising Mrs. Liu. However, dramatically, the day after the betrothal gifts were accepted, Makoto, the male lead of Willow's youth story, flew back from abroad, seemingly determined to reclaim everything he had lost. Willow immediately used all her savings to support his business venture. After that, Willow began distancing herself from me. She carefully stayed by Makoto's side, seemingly certain that I would go mad with love and try to hurt the men she loved, going out of her way to avoid situations where Makoto and I could meet. However, what she didn't know was that while she was tangled up with Makoto, I had found myself a personal secretary, someone more considerate, more gentle, and with greater potential than Willow. Most importantly, her background wasn't as privileged as Willow's, and she understood the value of gratitude. She would never cross the line. Chapter 5. When Makoto came knocking, I had just finished a business meeting and was resting in the reception room with my personal secretary, Sophia. Sophia was highly perceptive, not just in work matters. For instance, as soon as she noticed my expression change after Makoto entered, she quietly excused herself and went out to prepare coffee for me. This left enough time for me to talk with Makoto. I looked at Makoto sitting across from me. He wore a loosely fitting suit with a flashy shirt underneath, and his side-parted hairstyle was topped off with a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, giving him the vibe of a refined yet degenerate man. Judging by his appearance alone, he was the type of crush that was somewhat niche in recent years. This was how Makoto was back in high school, amidst a crowd of admirers. He caught Willow's attention with his rebellious attitude. Willow said she had never seen a soul as free as Makoto's, and without hesitation, she accepted his confession. Like a free fall, she began her downward spiral. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but smile, loosening up as I leaned casually against the sofa, raising my hand in a gesture for him to speak. In contrast to my relaxed demeanor, Makoto seemed defensive and made efforts to conceal his anxiety. He licked his lips, pretending to be casual and trying to appear at ease while nervously shaking his leg. However, his left hand was constantly rubbing his fingertips in agitation. Then he looked up at me and forced a smile, saying, "I heard Mr. Wong is about to get engaged to Willow. There's been some misunderstanding between me and Willow lately, and I feel guilty, so I wanted to." Hearing him begin with such lowly displays of intimidation and probing, I couldn't help but feel disappointed. To be seen as an eager second-generation rich boy desperate to take on someone else's baggage, how little they thought of me. I couldn't help but pinch my brow and interrupt him. "Mr. Ito, what do you think of her?" I asked, pointing toward the door. Makoto followed my gaze and saw Sophia standing by the door. Sophia was tall, with a curvaceous figure, and even in simple professional attire, her body was undeniably striking. She was holding a drink carefully, her eyes fixed on me since she returned. Seeing that I was looking at her, Sophia smiled faintly through the glass door, her expression perfectly balanced, showing affection without being overly obvious. Of course, this wasn't because Sophia was naturally gifted in this way. She had studied my preferences thoroughly and practiced repeatedly until she could present herself like this in front of me. I knew all of this, but I didn't care about the essence of who Sophia was. As long as she made me feel comfortable, she could stay by my side. This was the difference between Willow and me. Willow had invested all her feelings in someone she had created in her mind, a so-called soul. Yet she couldn't even recognize the most basic of pretenses. In the end, she was played with like a puppet by those beneath her. Perhaps predicting what I was about to say, Makoto's expression darkened. However, he knew he had no leverage against me, so he forced a smile, trying to go along with my words. "This young lady is outstanding in appearance, loyal to Mr. Wong, and a rare beauty." "Rare, is it?" I scoffed, interrupting him again. Makoto's expression faltered, but I didn't care. I smiled at him and continued, "As long as I like her, I can have as many of these kinds of women as I want. I could change them every day if I wanted to." Makoto understood the implication in my words, and he began to feel increasingly uneasy. I said, "People must recognize their own place. Someone like her, being kept by someone, shouldn't talk about independence. She's spending my money, so she naturally has to depend on me." That's where I differ from Willow. Maybe a few flattering tricks can easily win Willow's heart, making her want to give everything she has to someone else. But all that does is prove her stupidity, nothing more. As for me, I'm not going to pay someone to be worshipped, and I won't tie my fortune to any woman. Each word I spoke made Makoto Ito's face grow darker, and his clenched fists tightened even more. I continued, "So, Mr. Ito, your efforts are misdirected." Finally, I casually leaned back into the sofa, slightly raised my hand, and someone immediately entered the room as if on cue. They extended their hand to Makoto, and he had no choice but to pull out the voice recorder and miniature camera from his pocket. It was laughable. How could I possibly get into a confrontation with him over a woman? Throughout the entire process, Sophia stood beside me, bending over to hand me a still warm cup of coffee. From beginning to end, her eyes were fixed on me, as if everyone else in the room didn't matter to her at all. I simply reached out and gently pinched her cheek. Satisfied, Makoto could no longer stay seated. He stood up and hurriedly rushed out of the room. "Mr. Wong, he might have other recording devices hidden on him," an assistant standing nearby said, standing straight and respectfully addressing me. I replied, "It's fine. He should be able to figure it out," I said indifferently, then picked up the financial report on the desk and started reading. Indeed, from the very beginning, I knew Makoto was an ambitious man. He knew what he wanted and understood the correct path to take for each step. Otherwise, when Willow's mother approached him right before graduation, he wouldn't have left so easily. He took enough money and went abroad to receive an elite education that he could never have accessed otherwise. He waited for the passage of time and the accumulation of memories to make him the eternal moonlight in Willow's heart. Makoto had always been clear-headed. This little test today made him realize that he wasn't my match, and he certainly wasn't worthy of being my opponent. We weren't even in the same league. What I sought was different from what he and Willow were after. I don't make a habit of going out of my way to oppose him, and he isn't foolish enough to create a troublesome enemy for himself. Besides, I've always been someone who values talent, as long as they don't get in my way. Chapter 6. As expected, after that, Makoto never came to find me again. In contrast, he tightly controlled Willow under the guise of love, not allowing her to see me. This only made the engagement that had been delayed for so long seem more and more like a joke. During a recent gathering between our two families, Mrs. Liu gave Willow an ultimatum, ordering her to appear at the dinner. Willow agreed, but halfway through, the Liu family's butler received the news that Willow had been in a car accident. She claimed her injuries were severe and that she had to go to the hospital immediately. Without waiting for Mrs. Liu to respond, Willow hung up the phone. It seemed she was certain I wouldn't be angry with her. She tried to handle me with a poor excuse and a perfunctory attitude. But this time, it was a family dinner between both households. Her actions were a slap in the face to both families. In front of Mr. and Mrs. Liu, my father's face darkened, though inside, he was secretly pleased. He couldn't have hoped for a more ridiculous performance from Willow. Mr. Liu raised his glass, intending to toast my father, but my father pushed it away and turned to leave. After all, he was a prominent figure in the business community of F City. To be embarrassed like this by a junior was an affront. If he immediately ordered the place to be torn apart, it wouldn't have been excessive. Mr. Liu turned to speak to me, but Mrs. Liu shot him a glare, and he had no choice but to awkwardly smile at me, sit back down, and drink his sorrows alone. In the end, I stayed and finished the entire meal with them, but during the entire process, I remained silent. In Mrs. Liu's eyes, this was a demonstration of my deep affection for Willow, my unconditional tolerance. Before I left, Mrs. Liu pulled me aside and handed me a document. It was the land the Liu family had recently bought in the south of the city. I declined it twice, but in the end, I reluctantly accepted it. She said, "George, you're a good boy. I've always seen your feelings for Willow over the years. She's still young and doesn't understand, but I know your heart for her is sincere. That's why I trust you to take care of her. Don't worry, one day, she will be moved by your love." She added, "If the Wang family ever needs anything, just ask Auntie, and I'll do my best to help." After hearing Mrs. Liu's words, I finally allowed myself to smile sincerely. Deep down. Chapter 7. When I got home, my dad was lying on the sofa playing video games. I casually threw my jacket on the floor and slouched into the seat across from him. "Did it work out?" he asked. "Yeah, it's done," I replied. "At least 20 billion this time." "Your face still holds some weight." My dad gave a contented smile, and I watched his sharp eyes and brows. Time seemed to favor him more than anyone else. Even as the years mercilessly passed, all it did was carve an even stronger aura around him. Powerful, ruthless, cold. This was how the outside world saw him, and it was also the kind of person I strived to become. I thought back to when I was 18. A woman claiming to be my birth mother had appeared. She presented me with a beautifully packaged cake and told me that from now on, I would have a mother to love me. She said, "Your father raised you to be a monster just like him, but to be human. You should live in the light. Now, your mother is here to fill the love missing in your heart." After hearing her words, I smiled lightly. The woman thought I was accepting her, her eyes full of hope, her excitement and greed barely hidden. She had planned it all. She showed up only after I gained inheritance rights on my 18th birthday. Once I acknowledged her, she would have the leverage to stand against my father, but in the next moment, I politely asked her to leave. I used a few methods, and she never had the chance to come near me or my father again. Originally, I had someone investigate my so-called birth mother, but after hearing her words, I realized there was no need to look further. I had encountered enough of these types of people in my life. Their pasts had no real value for me to learn from. My father had once told me calmly that I was the product of someone plotting against him. That incident was a stain on his life, but my existence was not his shame. He said, "You are my son, and an independent individual. How your mother behaves is not something others can use to insult you. I respect all your choices, but I hope we share the same aspirations, and that you can stand by my side. In that way, our bond would run deeper. I am my father's proudest son and his companion on the battlefield. So, I would never cater to women, nor let their emotions influence me. As long as you're strong enough, people will come running to love you, and you can freely choose whatever type you prefer." Chapter 8. Thanks to the compensation Mrs. Liu provided, I managed to secure 2 more projects in F City. To reward me, my father registered a new company in a neighboring city as a birthday gift for my upcoming 26th birthday. In truth, my hands weren't exactly clean, but perhaps it was because Mrs. Liu had increased the pressure on Willow. Her behavior grew more erratic and rebellious, even openly challenging her mother in many situations. Before, Willow had never been able to get over Makoto's departure right before the college entrance exams. That unfulfilled youth, the one that didn't have a perfect ending, would forever be her regret. Willow told me that herself. She said this with tears streaming down her face, though I still think that the best way to end a youth filled with early relationships, tattoos, racing cars, drinking, and clubbing is to end up in jail. I still appeared to sympathize with her. Willow, with a melancholic look, self-pitied, saying, "Forget it. You'll never understand me." Someone as rule-abiding as you can never understand. There are things I truly don't understand, but one thing I do know. Willow, weighing 100 pounds, probably has 99 pounds of rebelliousness. When Mrs. Liu forcibly separated her from Makoto, she became even more obsessed with him. Now that Mrs. Liu was desperate to forge a marriage alliance with the Wang family, she still wouldn't allow Willow to be with Makoto. This would only push Willow, who was seeking her own love, to the extreme. Whether it was intentional or accidental, I couldn't tell. Lately, there had been an overwhelming number of pictures online showing Willow and Makoto together. In these pictures, their actions were intimate, far beyond what normal friends would do. The engagement dinner that was supposed to take place was still delayed, and there was no shortage of speculation online. Now, Willow's actions only confirmed the rumors that the marriage alliance between our families was falling apart. My father seized this opportunity to extract a hefty sum from Mrs. Liu. It seemed that both Mr. and Mrs. Liu were growing tired of constantly patching things up for Willow. They openly told Willow that if she insisted on choosing Makoto, they would sever ties with her. If this had been in the past, it might have had some effect on her, but now, Willow thought Makoto was her pillar of support. She had the power to stand against her family. She publicly declared on social media that she would never again be a puppet, that she would escape her unhappy family and choose Makoto, no matter how tough life became. She made a loud statement, but lately, when she went out, she was still enjoying the privileges that came with being a Liu family heiress. By 2025, netizens were no longer the type to sympathize with a rich girl's supposed tragic life. Willow's comment section was full of sarcastic remarks like these. Wait, am I reading this right? Is she really going to sever ties with her parents, who have supported her for over 20 years, for some lowlife? Another comment said, Mrs. Liu is the epitome of the modern woman. How did she end up raising a love-stricken daughter? If I were her mom, I'd be livid. Someone else said, laughing my ass off. I heard she got the betrothal gifts one day and turned into a cheating bitch the next day. I'd rather raise a slab of meat than deal with this. Another commenter wrote, it's hilarious. These rich girls' biggest worry is being dumped by their boyfriends before the college entrance exams, and they're here competing with us, poor people. Can you rich unhappy people be a bit more low-key? You're disturbing me, this useless person. One more commenter added, can Mrs. Liu adopt me? I'm not asking for anything. I just love being manipulated and controlled. Please feel free to use your money to control my life. In the midst of all the comments calling her puppet sister and little thug boy, Willow quietly disabled the comments section. Due to the current business interests and PR needs between the two families, I still decided to give Willow a call. I originally planned to discuss with her how to resolve this situation, but I didn't expect her to start with mockery. She snorted and said, what's this? You claim to love me so much, and now you can't keep up the act. She continued, George, do you know how disgusting it is, the way you're acting like my mother's puppet, trying to control me? I've already agreed to marry you, so you should be content. You've been licking my boots for so many years. Wasn't it all so you could marry me? Fine, I'm willing to marry you, but I have one condition. My heart and body belong to Makoto alone. I'll marry you, but you need to stop interfering with me. We'll keep our distance and live our own lives. I took a moment, replaying the conversation in my mind, and double-checked. Didn't she once bring up the idea of a marriage alliance as if she was dying to have it? When did it turn into me proposing to her? I replied, that's not possible. I can't be as shameless as you. I immediately hung up, turned, and posted the recording online, unilaterally announcing the end of my engagement to Willow. Willow's words instantly sparked public outrage. I didn't know whether Mrs. Liu was counting on the idea that I was still madly in love with Willow, or if she really just didn't want to manage her anymore. In the end, she didn't send anyone to manage Willow's PR or control the comments. Willow and Makoto were ruthlessly criticized. When she called me afterward, asking me to delete the recording, her tone had become more controlled, and her emotions were in check. Laughable. Right. Should I keep indulging her? I blocked Willow's number and pinned the post announcing our breakup on my profile. I then focused entirely on my work and didn't hear much about her after that. The next time I saw Willow, it was in an unexpected place. My recent project had yielded excellent results, and my father gave me 3 days off as a reward, while I was barefoot by the sea, enjoying the tranquility of the waves. A voice filled with anger suddenly called out, George. I opened my eyes and saw Willow standing not far away, her expression far from pleasant. She bit her lip and said, is this amusing to you? You just can't stay away. Wherever I go, you follow. Are you my mom's dog sent to watch over me? She said this as she quickly walked toward me in an agitated manner, just as Willow was pointing her finger at me and cursing about how no one should interfere with her life, even if my mother had sent me. Sophia returned. The next second, slap. Sophia slapped Willow so hard that she fell to the ground. Willow's face instantly swelled with redness. I quietly ended the call with Mrs. Liu on my phone and took this opportunity to send her the recorded voice message. I said, sorry, Mrs. Liu. I just happened to run into Willow and wanted to share some good news with you. I didn't expect her to react this way. I didn't even have a chance to explain. Mrs. Liu's chat window remained silent for a long time. After a while, a few words appeared. Don't worry about her. Well, I raised an eyebrow at that. It seemed Mrs. Lu had really been hurt this time. For a moment, I also recalled the recent rumors about Mr. and Mrs. Lu creating a new account. It seemed Willow had truly been abandoned. But Willow herself didn't seem to realize that. The fight for the flower girl's bouquet got intense. Two bikini-clad women were locked in a brutal tug-of-war, tearing at each other, and in the end, Willow couldn't hold her ground and was knocked down by Sophia, who proceeded to slap her. However, Willow didn't lose her spirit, continuing to curse and slap Sophia's palm with all her might. But the more she spoke, the harder she got slapped. Despite not being someone who liked to fight, I had to intervene. So 30 minutes later, I called for the fight to stop. Chapter 9. Enough. I spoke indifferently, looking at Willow, who was lying on the ground. Her once pretty face was now swollen, looking like a pig's head. Only her eyes still burned with fury, glaring at me as if she wanted to set me on fire with her gaze. I said, "Willow, I came here to relax. Meeting you was an accident. You suddenly losing your temper has ruined my mood, and now I feel unlucky. It's probably best if we never see each other again." My tone was calm, but Willow seemed to be pierced by my cold attitude. She froze, as if unable to accept my sudden change in demeanor. Just as I turned to leave with Sophia, Willow suddenly scrambled up from the ground behind us. "George," she shouted my name, pointing at Sophia by my side and asking, "Who is she?" Before I could respond, Sophia suddenly threw herself into my arms and called me, "Hubby." She hurt me. In that instant, my face darkened, but Sophia, seemingly unaware, continued to act cute, still holding on to me, and then turned to Willow, saying, "You don't need to know who I am. You just need to know that I'm George's true love. The one he really wants to marry is me. And that's enough." As she said this, she seemed nervous, her hand trembling slightly as she clung to my arm. She was taking a risk, and for that, she couldn't bring herself to meet my eyes. "How dare you shamelessly try to take my place? I'm his fiancée," Willow screamed hysterically, charging towards us. But just then, Makoto appeared, raising his hand to stop her. After a brief tug, Makoto couldn't control his emotions anymore and shoved Willow to the ground before turning and walking away. Only then did Willow regain her senses. She looked guilty, quickly getting up to follow Makoto. "Let go," I said coldly, then ruthlessly slapped Sophia across the face. A row of bodyguards I had called stood silently not far away. I turned and left, and Sophia hurried to follow me. But this time, she was kept behind the others. "Why?" I heard her shout behind me. "You clearly like me, don't you?" I ignored her, returning to F City surrounded by bodyguards. Afterward, I immediately had Sophia dismissed and compensated generously. Sophia wasn't satisfied, and eventually, she showed up at my doorstep. "I don't understand," she choked, her eyes red as she questioned me. "I only called you hubby. What's wrong with that?" Yes, perhaps in her eyes, she was just acting cute with me, but we both knew exactly what that phrase meant in that kind of situation, and I knew the consequences of letting such subtle probing continue. Sophia had gotten too bold, and her probing had crossed the line, and I hated when people tested my limits, especially when I had already given her more than enough. I had been satisfied with her performance and had provided her with everything: money, cars, houses, but she took all of that without honoring her promise not to cross any boundaries. Her behavior, demanding more, was just too much. Whether Sophia truly wanted a pure love or was trying to manipulate me into giving her an identity, I wouldn't keep someone like that around. I could offer her plenty of benefits, but I would never allow her to use such tactics to try to control or manipulate me. Chapter 10. The next time Willow came to see me, I had already replaced her. Still the same 36D, still the same innocent face, but this one was even more obedient than Sophia. Clearly, my current taste had settled into this type, but Willow seemed to let out a sigh of relief, smiling at me and saying, "I knew you were just trying to make me jealous. Since you fired her, I'll forgive you, but don't do it again." She then glanced at my new secretary, her brow furrowing again as she said, "Fire her too. I don't like her." I looked at her face, still bruised and not fully healed, then gave my new secretary a look. The secretary, understanding immediately, stepped forward and politely asked Willow to leave. Willow's expression darkened. Her gaze turned to me as she asked, "George, what is this supposed to mean?" I pressed my temple and said, "I thought I made myself clear last time." I then pulled out my phone, pulling up Willow's previous post on social media about wanting freedom, and said, "Now everyone knows the marriage alliance between our families has fallen apart. If Miss Lu is spotted coming in and out of my company again, it won't be good for either of our reputations." I thought my words were objective and reasonable, with a bit of consideration for Willow, but to my surprise, Willow became furious. She angrily swept everything off the coffee table. She shouted, "I thought you'd understand me, George. I always thought you were different from everyone else." I was speechless. Her betrayed, deceived expression made it look as though I was the one who had cheated. I was ready to throw her out, but since we were childhood friends, I patiently advised her, saying, "You'd better start seeing me the same way you see everyone else." She choked back tears and said, "Why? Makoto's been through so much abroad. I just want to help him. Why do you all keep forcing me?" It seemed like she completely couldn't understand what I was saying. Still rambling on to herself, I didn't hesitate any longer and immediately called the building security. As Willow was escorted out, I calmly reiterated to her, "Miss Liu, the marriage alliance has been called off. You and I are now strangers. Please don't appear at Wang's company again. You're not welcome here." It was only then that Willow seemed to realize I was serious about cutting ties with her. Her eyes looked momentarily confused, and she unconsciously muttered, "George." She didn't have the chance to finish her sentence because I had already had her thrown out. Finally, the world was quiet again. I glanced at the time. Great. Willow had wasted 40 precious minutes of my day. Now I'd have to stay late tonight to make up for it. Chapter 11. Willow and Makoto broke up again. It was because Makoto's company filed for bankruptcy, and because news spread that Mrs. Liu was pregnant with a second child. In fact, these were the same event. When it became clear that Willow had truly been abandoned, Makoto quickly took everything from the company and ran. This time, Willow really suffered a blow. She became increasingly insecure and paranoid. During her period of self-pity, everyone was busy. The Liu family was busy preparing for the new life, and my father and I were focused on expanding the product market. In recent years, the internet had been full of new opportunities, like the live broadcast dramas that became popular earlier this year. The revenue they generated shocked everyone, not only my family, but also several leading companies in F-City were trying to grab this big pie. Last month, the Liu family signed up several big streamers for a trial run, only for them to be reported for tax evasion and sent to prison. Now, every company was cautious. One move, and 100 would pounce. But in the world of fame and fortune, no matter how dirty and corrupt things were, they would always be covered up under a shiny surface. Once again, the Liu family sent us an invitation. This time, I was introduced to a young woman from a side branch of the Liu family. She fit my aesthetic perfectly, from her looks to her figure. During the dinner, Mrs. Liu specially arranged for her to sit beside me. Seeing that I didn't refuse, she smiled widely. I knew what she was implying. The Liu family wanted to expand their market and didn't want to give up on the marriage alliance with the Wang family, but they had just abandoned Willow. The next option was still just a fetus, with an uncertain future. Mrs. Liu wanted to use this as a way to secure me. I hesitated but didn't commit either way. Mrs. Liu seemed somewhat displeased, while Mr. Liu was somewhat smug. He was proud of having a son so late in life and couldn't resist drinking a bit too much during the dinner. Later, in his drunken state, he said to my father, "What's the use of making all this money? What's the point of life? Isn't it all about the wife, the kids, and a warm home? That's the true meaning of a man's struggle. If you can't even get a wife or kids, then what's the point? A man like that is useless, living such a failed life." My father smiled and stroked his chin, and with Mr. Liu's smug look, he suddenly punched him in the nose. "Worthless fool, who gave you the right to speak here?" Afterward, he wiped his hand, downed the remaining drink in his glass, and the room fell into a brief silence. Mr. Liu sobered up a little and, recognizing his mistake, apologized to my father. Actually, this wasn't the first time I had noticed it. A long time ago, I realized that Mr. Liu had no real status in the Liu family. Despite it being the Liu family group, the financial power was firmly in Mrs. Liu's hands. I even once suspected that Mr. Liu might be a door-in husband. Later, I learned it was simply because he had voluntarily handed over the financial power to Mrs. Liu, thinking that doing so was an act of love and responsibility. This time, I didn't put on my usual mask of calmness. I threw my chopsticks down and splashed the wine on the face of the girl next to me, who had been saying how much she admired Mrs. Liu. Her face was filled with confusion. But I gave her a confirming look, making it clear that I was venting my anger. I said, "Sorry, our views don't align. No need to continue this conversation." With that, my father and I left the scene in a high-profile manner. What had started as a farce ended with the Liu family publicly apologizing to us. Over the years, the strength of both families had shifted from being on equal footing to now, where the Liu family had been left far behind by the Wang family. My father ignored them for half a month before reluctantly forgiving them. The very next morning, the Liu family sent another new person our way. While I was out for my morning run, she appeared abruptly and said, "What a coincidence." I didn't refuse, playfully leading her on for a short walk. Before she could finish her sentence, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of me. It was Willow, who had emerged from the muck, looking somewhat different from before. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, but before she could call my name, her gaze shifted to the person beside me. Clearly, the two were familiar with each other, and the person beside me was the first to speak. calling Willow cousin. Willow rolled her eyes and ignored her, then turned to me, asking softly, "George, why are you with her?" I shrugged and replied, "This is my new marriage prospect from the Liu family. We're working on building a relationship." Willow froze when she heard that. Her gaze became filled with resentment, and she took a few steps forward, trying to grab my hand, but I pushed her away. The girl beside me, seeing this, spoke sarcastically in a tone that reeked of pretentiousness. "Sis, you've been out of the picture for a while and lost all your manners. Didn't you hear what George said? I'm his marriage prospect now." Willow seemed anxious and ignored her, shouting at me, "George, I sent you a message. You saw it, didn't you?" A message? Not long ago, my secretary had indeed reported that my personal inbox was flooded with junk mail. I wasn't interested in sorting through it, so I had her handle it all. It seemed that my posture of deep thought once again caused Willow to misunderstand. She suddenly brightened up again, her eyes sparkling, and she said earnestly, "I understand now. You must have been forced into this. Wait for me. I'll go talk to my mom about this." With that, she turned and left, leaving me to stare blankly at her cousin, to figure out what had actually happened. I had my secretary restore the junk emails in my inbox. Because there were so many, she thoughtfully selected the most representative ones for me to see. I quickly scanned through one. "George, I've misunderstood you all this time. Makoto has been lying to me. It turns out you're the only one who truly loves me in this world. I'll wait." I didn't even finish reading the message before I quickly turned off my phone screen. The more I saw, the more I feared I might lose brain cells. Sometimes, I really do admire Willow. In the past few years, with the impact of new industries, many of F-City's old aristocratic families have been undergoing transformations. Several families have been fighting each other to the death, and our generation of heirs, who grew up together, have long since joined this silent war. And yet, Willow's small mind always seems preoccupied with romance novels filled with love and passion. Sometimes, I even think she's the punishment the Liu parents deserve. Over the years, they've hardly had clean hands. They've done every dirty deed possible in their scramble for business. And now, their daughter has turned out to be a naive, sweet fool. Chapter 12. I thought Willow's words last time were just empty talk. However, not long after, I heard that Willow had returned to the Liu family. A daughter who had already been discarded couldn't expect to be pampered upon her return. Both my father and I didn't have much hope for Willow, but we accelerated our efforts on other fronts. In the past, Mrs. Liu had planted many hidden traps in the projects she gave us. She never intended to let go of the Wang family's juicy stake. Even if the marriage alliance had really succeeded, this old fox would have found the perfect opportunity to explode the bomb and completely ruin the Wang family. Mrs. Liu's scheming nature was never hidden. It was she who had subtly encouraged Willow to approach me back when we were in school, but she hadn't expected her daughter to be intercepted by some small-time thug at school. Willow had gone on to become an internet celebrity, starring in short dramas, but the rivalry between the Liu and Wang families never ceased. We accepted everything the Liu family gave us, but the pit this old fox thought she dug for us would, sooner or later, end up backfiring on her. We had expected to drag things out a bit longer, but we didn't anticipate that Willow would surprise us in such a big way. She actually hospitalized her father. The reason? Mr. Liu found out that Mrs. Liu had been cheating on him, and when he yelled at her, Willow, in a fit of anger, grabbed a vase and smashed it over her father's head. Mrs. Liu didn't feel guilty in the slightest. Instead, she was relieved and proud. Thinking that Willow had finally grown up and come to her senses, she immediately went to the hospital to scold her child. To be honest, even my father and I thought she was a bit unhinged at this point. But remembering what this old fox had done in her younger days, we weren't as surprised. She had gone from being an ordinary village girl to becoming a lady of high society, all by adhering to a moral code with no bottom line. She had been married 4 times, each divorce helping her amass wealth. She even managed to send 2 of her ex-husbands to prison and ended up with most of their assets. When Mrs. Liu and Willow came to visit again, they expected me to rush out the door with excitement, embracing Willow with open arms. However, my father and I were already on our way to Paris for a vacation. Mrs. Liu and Willow couldn't even get through our front door. Willow didn't believe I would treat her like this and stubbornly stood outside our villa, refusing to leave. When she arrived, she was full of ambition, but now, she looked utterly defeated. The butler failed to persuade her to leave, so they resorted to using a drone to livestream the situation from the yard. In the end, it was an infuriated Mrs. Liu who forcibly took Willow away. Then my phone started ringing non-stop. I handed my phone to my secretary, and she was tasked with blocking one new unknown number after another. After finishing dinner, my father lazily burped. I asked him, "Are we closing in now?" He looked at me, smiling, and said, "After watching the same show for so long, it's hard not to get bored." I lowered my head, set my fork and knife down, and quietly said, "Then let me settle the score for you." Chapter 13. The negative news about the head of the Wong family spread like wildfire overnight across every platform on the internet. The situation became so severe because someone had accused my father of hiring a hitman, and I was allegedly his accomplice in hiding the body. The news also reported that 26 years ago, my father had committed a crime of coercion, which led to a pregnancy. Afterward, to inherit the family business, he turned the tables and accused the woman of fabricating the charges. Although my father ultimately ended up in prison, the truth about this matter has remained controversial over the years, and the woman involved has been constantly pointed at. Living like a rat, the whistleblower suggested that if the woman had truly set him up, then my father should have hated her and never been willing to spend a large sum to secure custody of the child later on. At this point, the truth seemed almost to have come to light. Moreover, the mysterious exposer pointed out that on my 18th birthday, 8 years ago, the woman traveled all the way to F City just to celebrate her biological son's coming-of-age birthday. But after that, she disappeared completely, vanishing without a trace. With such a series of leading accusations, it was hard not to associate this with the idea of my father hiring a hitman and hiding the body. I listened calmly to my secretary's report, then turned to look at the person sitting across from me, raising an eyebrow and asking, "Do you think I'm the accomplice, too, like the exposer claims?" "Impossible." Willow, sitting across from me, shook her head. Her gaze toward me was gentle, filled with warmth. She said, "They don't understand you, George. You're the most upright person in this world, compared to before." Willow's eyes looked much clearer. I remained silent for a while, then couldn't help but laugh. "Willow, perhaps you're the one who doesn't understand me." She pursed her lips but then turned her head to state her purpose. She said, "Wongs might not survive this. The police are already preparing to investigate. George, maybe we can pretend to get married. At least we'll be able to save part of it." Her eyes were full of hope as she said this. I replied indifferently, "Let's wait and see. What if there's a twist in the story?" Willow wanted to say something more but closed her mouth. She had now understood her mother's tactics. If Mrs. Liu wanted to teach me a lesson, even if the matter was false, it would eventually become true. The online calls for a thorough investigation were growing louder. I completely understood how the netizens felt. Before, the small scandals of wealthy families were just entertainment, but when it involved human lives, it had to be taken seriously. So, when the police car stopped in front of the Wong family house, the entire internet was watching intently. Many people gathered outside the Wong family's gate, live streaming on their phones. Everyone was waiting for a result, and the result was that the police found nothing in the Wong family house. 3 days later, Mr. and Mrs. Liu were arrested by the police for attempted murder, and the mother I had been searching for, who had been the subject of everyone's speculation online, finally made her appearance. It turned out there was no such thing as hired murderers or body disposal. 8 years ago, I bought her a small island, and for all these years, she had been raising pigs, living a secluded life. As for why she listened to me, from the moment she successfully evaded the Wong family's bodyguards and came to me, I had told her the people who sent her wanted her dead. She wasn't stupid, and quickly realized her role in this game. So, she obediently accepted my arrangement and cooperated with me to create the illusion that she had been dealt with by the Wong family. Mrs. Liu, thinking she had control over this leverage, had long considered the entire Wong family to be in her pocket, until recently, when she had someone expose the past incident, thinking it would teach me a lesson. I seized this opportunity to withdraw some of the bodyguards protecting my biological mother's safety. Her whereabouts were exposed, and in the past few days, she had experienced at least 6 car accidents, home robberies, and falling objects from high places. She was truly frightened and came crying, asking for my contact information to seek help. When I asked her to step forward and identify the Liu family's crimes, she no longer refused. Not only did she expose how the Liu family had hired a hitman, but she also accused Mrs. Liu of orchestrating the false accusation against my father 26 years ago, after having an affair with him. The purpose of this was to teach my father a lesson and show him how painful the consequences of rejecting her would be. That year, the Liu family hosted a banquet, and it was the first time my father met Mrs. Liu. At that time, Mrs. Liu already had a bad reputation in the social circle. Many people said she looked like fine wine from afar but was toxic when seen up close. That night, at the banquet, Mrs. Liu took a keen interest in my father. She secretly made a bold attempt, but my father not only resisted her advances but even threatened to tell Mr. Liu. This made her hold a grudge against him. Now, with Mr. and Mrs. Liu in prison, Willow stood outside my house in the storm, waiting all night, trying to beg me to let her parents go. I said, "I told you there would be a twist." I looked down from the second floor, smiling as I spoke to her. "Don't get too excited. The old fox won't fall so easily." My father, standing behind me, patted my shoulder. I smiled and nodded in agreement. Chapter 14. I showed Willow a clear way out. Mrs. Liu may have fallen, But the Liu family hadn't collapsed yet. It was just a matter of replacing the person in power. Everything was far from being at its end. She choked up and asked, "Do you really have to be this ruthless?" I remembered when she came to see me half a month ago and I asked her, "If the truth isn't what the public thinks it is, what will you do? Help me, or help your parents?" Willow's answer at the time was, "George, why are you overthinking this? We can get married first, transfer some of the assets, and I'll always stay by your side to face the challenges together." Her tone was gentle, but it couldn't hide her desire to control me. Since that was the case, I could only give her back as much. The day the Liu family was reported for major tax evasion, I boarded a flight to Iceland with my secretary for a vacation. Just when things seemed to be going smoothly, Willow was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. Her reckless youth, filled with indulgence, had eventually brought her retribution many years later. Willow could no longer keep going. Soon after, Mr. and Mrs. Liu were convicted of economic crimes, attempted murder, and several charges related to organizing, leading, and participating in organized crime. By the time they got out of prison, Willow would probably have aged another 3 years. When the plane landed, my secretary told me Willow had been calling me nonstop. I thought for a moment and decided to pick up. On the other end of the line, Willow's voice was choked with tears. She said, "I'm dying, and you really won't regret this. George, from now on, you've lost a girl who was completely devoted to you." I responded. "Completely devoted?" I couldn't help but laugh. Was she completely devoted on the first day of our engagement and then cheated the next day? Or was she the one who kicked me when I was down during my most difficult times? Willow, you don't measure up as an opponent. And frankly, you're not worthy as a human being either. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. After a while, she finally regained her voice and said, "George, you don't understand. I really loved you. I cut her off. You were just confused, right? You were fooled by a scumbag." I chuckled and said, "It's okay, Willow, I understand." With that, I subtly raised my hand to the secretary beside me. She immediately understood, leaning her head against my palm and softly calling out, "Young Master Wang." "George, who is she?" Willow's voice on the phone exploded. I didn't answer her, just lightly spoke into the phone. "You know, the reason Makoto came back was because I had someone tip him off about your situation, letting him know that his ex-girlfriend was still thinking about him. He came running like a fool. What I didn't expect was that I thought Willow would at least pretend for a bit, but she didn't even try to fake it. She immediately jumped into Makoto's arms. Not only that, she had to throw a few jabs at me, imagining two men fighting over her in jealousy and despair, just to satisfy her own vanity. I laughed. Who would want to be with a woman like this? Certainly not me. Late at night, I got a call from my father. "You did well," he said, his voice filled with a sense of relief. Then he added, "I'm sorry for trapping you in my hatred for the past 20 years. From now on, I hope you can fully take control of your life and soar freely." I smiled and replied, "This is exactly what I've wanted to do, Father. I think. To be born with the bloodline connected to you, to be taught by you, and to avenge you, this is the sweetest thing I could ever desire." In the depths of my heart, I silently completed the words, then turned my gaze toward the depths of the night. My memories were once again pulled back in time. On my 18th birthday, that woman with a face full of schemes appeared before me. I didn't bother learning about her past, but instead, I had someone investigate who sent her. Following the trail, I learned some old stories. 30 years ago, in F City's business world, a rising star emerged. He was from a prestigious family, highly educated, and had an ambition that others lacked. His early life was remarkably smooth, with loyal friends, a successful career, and a lover he met by chance. However, it was that seemingly gentle and understanding woman who turned out to be a pawn bought by his rivals. After a brief role-playing act, she accused him of coercion, leaving him with scars and a false accusation. After his arrest, he fell into despair. It was a critical period in his career, with his self-established company about to go public, but with irrefutable evidence against him. How could he clear his name? His old friends distanced themselves, and even his parents abandoned him. What had once been a life full of luxury and promise quickly turned into a farce, like a joke. It turned out that parental care and a lover's affection only existed under certain conditions. In the face of power and profit, emotions were shown to be so unreliable. So, later, he made his final compromise in life. He used his remaining savings to secure custody of his son and named him George. He left the family, raising his son alone, teaching him everything. In the end, before his parents passed away, he single-handedly revived the fading family business and officially took control. Yet, the mockery never ceased. No matter how high he rose, his former rivals always looked at him from an elevated position, waiting to push him back down to the bottom. And now, those mocking voices and gazes finally disappeared for good. Yes, I had noticed it when I was very young, the contempt in Mrs. Liu's eyes when she spoke with my father. From that moment, I understood who my target was. It took me 20 whole years to make Mrs. Liu believe that I was wholeheartedly devoted to her daughter. After all, no matter how cunning the old fox was, it's hard to question a child's sincerity. Even my father didn't realize that I had been intentionally getting close to Willow from the start. But I'll never forget, I am my father's child. I should stand side by side with him against our enemies. My goal is to climb the mountains my father climbed, not to be trapped by the mundane dogma of society or others' control. This is my lifelong creed, and it will never change.